Imagine working your whole life for a retirement you never fully enjoy. You save, you sacrifice, you tell yourself, someday. And then someday shows up and you're 72 and your knees hurt and the trip to Patagonia you always wanted to take just isn't in the cards anymore. According to a hedge fund manager turned author named Bill Perkins, this is the quiet tragedy of modern personal finance. His book, Die with Zero, argues that most of us are saving way too much, spending way too little, and optimizing our entire lives for a goal that actually hurts us. And the math behind his case is harder to argue with than you'd think. Here's the basic idea. Money is a tool you trade your life energy for. Every hour at work, every weekend you skip, every trip you delay, you're paying a price in time you can't get back. The conventional advice says save aggressively, invest early, and cash in later. And that's not wrong, exactly. But Perkins points out something the personal finance world rarely talks about. You can't cash in time once it's gone. A 25-year-old and a 75-year-old don't get the same value from the same dollar. At 25, you can hike the Inca Trail, sleep on a friend's couch in Tokyo, party until 4 in the morning. At 75, a nice dinner out is an adventure. Same dollar, very different life. Perkins calls this the mismatch between your money curve and your ability curve. Your net worth tends to climb all the way until you retire, but your physical ability to spend it starts sliding in your 40s. By the time the bank account is at its fattest, your body has already turned down the brightness on what you can actually do with it. Think of it like stocking a pantry for a dinner party that ends at 9, but you keep shopping until midnight. Eventually, you've got shelves full of food and no guests left to feed. That's what dying with millions looks like, in Perkins' view. Unclaimed life, sitting in the pantry while the party's already over. And the really uncomfortable part is that nobody ever told you this was a risk. Running out of money in old age is a scenario every financial planner will walk you through. The opposite scenario, dying with way too much and having lived way too little, barely gets a mention. Perkins' whole book is a slow argument that this second scenario is not only real, it's almost certainly what's happening to the average disciplined saver right now. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Perkins doesn't just argue a philosophy, he builds a math-heavy case, and it rests on two core ideas that do most of the heavy lifting. The first is what he calls the memory dividend. When you spend money on an experience, you don't just get the experience itself, you get every single replay of that memory for the rest of your life. The camping trip you took at 28 pays emotional dividends when you tell the story at 35, at 50, at 70. Every time you run into an old friend and laugh about that one weekend, that's interest the experience is paying you, years after you paid for it. The earlier you bank the memory, the more years it compounds. A great experience at 40 might give you 3 decades of replay value. The same experience at 70 gives you 1. Perkins pushes this further. He says the people you shared those experiences with are paying memory dividends of their own, thinking about you in those stories, circling back to you in their minds. So a single good trip at 28 isn't a one-time expense. It's a small compounding asset that you and everyone you brought along get to draw from for the rest of your lives. Try running that math on an extra $1,000 sitting in a high-yield savings account, and it starts looking embarrassingly small by comparison. The second idea is time buckets. Traditional financial advice plans your money by year or by decade. Perkins says plan your experiences by decade too, because certain experiences have expiration dates that nobody likes to admit. Backpacking through Southeast Asia at 25 is not the same experience at 65. Skiing at 30, skiing at 70. Running a marathon, raising young kids, attending a buddy's wild bachelor weekend, learning to surf, pulling an all-nighter at a music festival. Each of these has a window, and the window closes whether you use it or not. So he tells readers to literally draw a grid. 10-year buckets from now until 90, then fill in what experiences belong in each bucket. You'll quickly find that the physical ones, the wild ones, the social ones, all clump heavily toward the front. The quieter ones, the contemplative ones, drift toward the back. And if you're not funding those front buckets now, you're not getting another shot at them later. The 40-year-old version of you cannot cash in the 25-year-old's vacation. That trip you kept meaning to take in your 20s has quietly aged out, and no amount of money will age it back in. Perkins also leans on a piece of research that surprises a lot of people. Studies on retirees, including data from the Employee Benefit Research Institute, show that most retirees don't meaningfully spend down their savings. They actually die with the bulk of their wealth still sitting there untouched, which means the very people who feared running out of money the most also never got to use the money they spent their lives earning. They optimized for a threat that never arrived and missed the life that was available the entire time. The fear of running out quietly became the thing that actually cost them the most. So what do you actually do with all this? Perkins isn't telling you to blow your savings and move into your car. He has some very specific practical moves. First, match your spending to your ability curve. Your 20s and 30s are the peak years for physical adventure. Your 40s and 50s are the peak years for meaningful travel and big family experiences. Your 60s and beyond are peak years for quieter joys, like time with grandkids or slower, more reflective trips. Spend accordingly. Don't wait until 65 to travel the world if the knees you're going to do it with live in your 40s. And don't wait until retirement to take your kids on the big trip, because by then the kids are grown and the whole reason for the trip has aged out. Second, give with a warm hand, not a cold one. Perkins is blunt about inheritances. If you leave your kids a large chunk of money when you die in your 80s, they receive it in their 50s or 60s, when they're already established and when the money mostly pads their own retirement account. He argues you should give that money earlier, when your kids are in their late 20s through their 30s. Those are the years when they're buying homes, having children, starting businesses, and when the cash genuinely changes their life. The same dollar, given 15 years earlier, is worth dramatically more in actual lived impact. Perkins calls the default inheritance system a kind of accident, where the timing of the gift is set by when you happen to die, not by when the recipient could most use it. And he thinks we should be intentional about that instead. Third, use insurance to offload the risk instead of hoarding against it. Perkins is a professional risk trader, and he points out that one of the biggest reasons people oversave is fear of catastrophe. Long-term care, medical bills, outliving your money. Those are real risks, but risks can be purchased. Long-term care insurance, annuities, or even just realistic budgeting with a professional. Each of these lets you fund the downside so you can actually enjoy the upside. If you're hoarding cash for a worst-case scenario that may never come, you might be paying two costs at once: the interest you didn't earn and the life you didn't live. There's a fourth move that's more a mindset than a tactic. Set an actual target year to peak net worth and then start the planned slide. Perkins argues that hardly anyone ever picks an actual target for when their net worth is supposed to stop climbing, so it just keeps climbing by default until they die. Picking a peak year, somewhere in your 50s or 60s, flips the script. Before that year, you're still building. After that year, you're deliberately turning money back into experiences, family time, and generosity. The number stops being the goal and starts being the fuel. Here's the part of the book that tends to stick with people long after they put it down. Perkins asks you to calculate something he calls your personal interest rate, not the number next to your savings account, the rate at which your ability to enjoy life decays as you age. Because if that rate is real, and it very much is, then holding money and not using it starts looking like a negative return decision. You're not earning 4% in a savings account. You're losing something much larger in enjoyment, in experiences, and in years you can't buy back no matter how much you saved. Net worth tracking only shows the number going up. Perkins is asking you to track the number going down right next to it, because the gap between those two curves is the real story. And the deeper truth underneath all of it is about identity. You don't retire on your net worth. You retire on your memories. The bank account gets settled by an estate attorney, usually in about a week. The memories get replayed by you, every night until the very last one. So the real question becomes how rich a life you actually lived on your way to saving all that money. That's a question the standard retirement calculator has no idea how to answer. Perkins tells a story about a friend who was always the "we'll do it next year" guy. Next year became 10 years, became a diagnosis. The friend had the money, he never had the trip. And Perkins says the most expensive purchase you can make in a lifetime isn't a bad car or an overpriced house. It's an unused year of your one finite life. A year with the legs and the lungs and the people around you, quietly spent building a balance you were never going to use. That line lands differently depending on where you are. In your 20s, it's a quiet permission slip to stop apologizing for spending on experiences. In your 40s, it's a wake-up call to stop deferring what matters. And closer to retirement, it's a reminder that all that money was always meant to be turned back into living at some point. Perkins isn't arguing against saving itself, only against saving on autopilot. He wants you to make the trade-off on purpose instead of sleepwalking into a life where the only thing that grew was the balance. Die with Zero isn't really about dying broke. Perkins is very clear on that. The book is about dying having actually used what you earned, about matching the size of your money to the size of the life you want to lead, about recognizing that the whole point of all that saving was never the saving itself. It was the living it was supposed to fund. If this shifted how you think about money and time even a little, hit subscribe. I break down the personal finance and business books that are actually worth the hours you put into them, and the next one on the list might change what you do with the next decade.